I'm feeling a little bit rough, so I'm sorry if I sound a little bit rough. One of the first things that I'd like to do actually is change this word to PowerShell. That previous talk, I think I really labelled myself the wrong way on Kieran's talk, which was great talk, by the way. But I'll stick to Meterpreter given that's what I know. And as Pat said, I've somehow managed to land a whale of working with Rapid 7 over the last 6 months or so, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. So yeah, I am a dev, I'm not a security guy. Most of the stuff that you guys talk about in infrastructure and security land, I don't really understand, but I smile and nod happily. But I'm very much about building cool tools that you guys can do some crazy stuff with. So what I'm going to do is follow on a little bit from what George was talking about earlier on, and I want you to pretend that the whole idea of initial penetration has actually been done and Meterpreter is running. And so what I want to show is what kind of damage someone like George can do if he's able to persist a Meterpreter session on a PC. And that can be whether it's got elevated privileges or not. Now, who are the pen testers in the room, just to give me an idea? You guys might be a bit bored if you know this stuff already. Who knows what Metasploit is? That's a good sign. Who knows what Meterpreter is? Yeah, who's used it in the last, say, month? Who's working off head in GitHub? Who's working off my brains in GitHub? Okay. So there's a couple of things that I'm going to show you that haven't made it in master this yet that I'd like to share. But anyway, before I get into that, so my goal is to be really stupid, keep slides minimal, and spend most of my time in a console showing you how this stuff works. So Pat's already answered that question, I'm not going to go over that. Metasploit you already know, Meterpreter. Meterpreter is kind of my baby now. The job that I got back in September was literally make Meterpreter more stable, add some more features, and ultimately make it easier to build so people like you guys can pull it down and add your own stuff to it. Because Rapid 7 love their open source. And then we can spend the rest of the time just demoing. And I've offered nothing to the demo gods. It's arguably very risky. So let's skip all this stuff. So yeah, as I said, you guys know what Metasploit is. Rapid 7's pen testing network framework. Great job, FC Moore. Now, just being in the same IRC room as this guy. There's a guy called Juan Vasquez, if you've never heard of before. He and HC Moore stay up until like 4 o'clock in the morning their time, which is like midday my time. So it's me and these two guys, and I just sit back and watch the text scrolling. The stuff these guys do, the speed at which they do it is just amazing. So, very fortunate. So, Metasploit apparently has over 200,000 users and contributors. I don't know where the line is, but that's a lot of people. Stored exploits, encoders, payloads, not sleds, all these other crazy things. It's a really cool tool. Also, I've got to put this in for obvious reasons. There is a pro version of Metasploit, and it's got some really cool stuff in which I'll mention towards the end of the presentation. So Meterpreter, I'm going to say it's Metasploit's kind of go-to payload. Pen testers might disagree with me, and they might decide to have their own PowerShell. There are a few versions. So Windows is the main one, and that was predominantly what I was told to work on during my time where I have touched on Python, PHP, and POSIX stuff. I avoided Java. See if everyone can figure out why. It was originally created by Matt Miller, so I'm sure the name Skate is familiar to most people in the room. This is a wickedly smart guy. And then on top of that, there's been a bunch of other really smart people that have contributed too. So I'm standing on the shoulders of the giants. They've done all the heavy lifting. It's pretty easy for me to come in and just kind of brush up the edges and then build on top of it. So really want to emphasize how much these people have done because, yeah, when I first saw this thing in action, I mean, literally, I downloaded Meterpreter the day before my interview and compiled it. And when I saw migration work, I was amazed. It's fantastic stuff. All right, so Windows Meterpreter. Just like the POSIX Meterpreter, probably most of Meterpreters. When you run it, it doesn't touch disk. George mentioned that earlier on. It's completely in memory. It utilizes something called reflective DLL injection. It is a technique that was developed by a guy called Stephen Fewer from Hardening Security in Ireland. And what this does is allows you to inject the DLL into any process, not using the typical sort of load library approach, but a custom approach which prevents it from being recognized in the Windowsy way, which means when you analyze the process with various tools, you can't see it. Literally, to see if the server is running, other than detecting Notepad connecting to the internet, you need to look at the process's memory and scan for its presence. So it's pretty wicked. All right, so my job has been updating, fixing, stabilizing, improving, adding some new features. But as a defender, you should keep this thing off your box and PowerShell. All right, so that's it for slides. I'm going to be sitting over in the corner for the rest of the time. All right.
OJ's friendly, OJ's approachable. Feel free to ask him questions.
Oh yes, as we go, I think it's good to ask while the context is up. So, all right. So what I'm going to do, MSF console. So this is how you start the sort of non-managers version of Metasploit. There is a nice kind of friendly web UI, but it's very hard to automate. So and this is running on a particularly low spec laptop, so give me a little bit of time. So you can see, I mean, this number goes up quite a lot. This is kind of a mind-blowing number. But at least you should be on 4.9 if you aren't already. There's some really fantastic stuff that's gone in, and a large number of exploits and encoders and all kinds of wonderful stuff. All right, so my default configuration when I start up Metasploit, MSF console, is to sort of pre-bake things like port numbers. I've changed things slightly for the sake of this presentation. And you'll notice down here, multi-handler. Multi-handler is a module that allows you to sort of be ignorant of how a remote target's being exploited. You're just going to sit there and listen for a callback, or perhaps connect out through a bind shell session. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this running behind the scenes. I'm going to call set excellent session false. And what that will do is I'll kick this thing off as a job behind the scenes, and it doesn't matter how many connection attempts there are, it'll just receive another session. So if you had some kind of automated script like installing a PowerShell thing in SCCM, and then the entire network comes online and you get 3,000 machines connecting to you, then that will sit there behind the scenes and take 3,000 shells, and then you can start interacting, which is pretty wicked. Not that I've ever seen it, to be honest, I've never seen it. But yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to point this back to my local machine, and -J. So that behind the scenes now is sitting there as a listener waiting for a connection. Now this is where I'd like you to suspend your disbelief just for a minute, and I'm going to pretend that I've just owned myself by running this executable. Okay. So this is it's similar to what you would have seen in George's demo, except that I'm using something called reverse TCP. And George was using HTTP, which has a slightly different semantics around how the communications actually works. So you can see a list of sessions by typing sessions, and then you can interact with it by specifying an identifier. Now at this point, Meterpreter out of the box comes with quite a number of commands. Now most of these are available, or these are available on Windows. Some of these are not available on POSIX. As you can imagine, there are certain things that are specific to Windows that you won't find on POSIX. And in the case of something like Python Meterpreter or PHP Meterpreter, it's kind of hard for it to know. In some cases, what's available on Windows, so some commands just aren't available. So things like getting proxy configuration, which is like default, i.e. proxy config, you wouldn't find that on the Linux box, for example. But it's smart enough to know sort of what's running and whatnot, and it will remove the commands that aren't available on that target. So there's some basic enumeration stuff that you can do. You can say, what user am I currently running as. Another bit of information that is surprisingly handful is getting the process ID that you're running under. And that I'll explain maybe a bit later why that's useful. And then there's the other basics like giving the IP config information. So whether your host is dual homed or anything like that, and then you can start sort of preparing other kinds of attacks.
Sorry, OJ, can you just pump that font size a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, mate. Blame Scott, because I asked him if it was big enough. He's like, yeah, it's fine. Like I threw you under the bus there, Scott. Is that better? Is that better? Yeah. Guys in the back can see that okay? Yep, cool. All right. And other cool info like the routes for that particular host. And you can add to these and merge them and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Although I'm not going to go into that because I literally have 2 VMs. And it's not particularly interesting. All of the routes that I would need are already set up. Okay. Yes?
When you get the session on that Windows system,
yep.
There has to be TCP access between the client and you, so it's outbound from the client.
In this particular case, I chose a reverse TCP payload. You can choose bind TCP or reverse HTTP. There are a number of different mechanisms that you can use use to establish that connection. I'm using TCP because it's the quickest out of a lot of them, and I don't have to worry about egress and WAFs and IDSs and all that other stuff. So normally people like George, as you've seen, would use HTTP or HTTPS because they'll go via proxies and all kinds of other stuff.
So if you get it on the box that's behind several layers of firewall, then you can push it out through the standard system proxy setting.
And authentication credentials.
Big part.
You can use the local.
Yep, you can, that's all configurable. For those questions, ask the smarter dudes. They're sitting over there.
They just said it, right?
There you go. I wasn't talking to you. All right. So there's other stuff that is useful to pen tests that you can pull out of this. So this is relatively new things like getting environment variables. For example, I don't know, open SSL conf. So that'll go off and pull out environment-specific stuff. Now, one thing I'd like to mention that I haven't already is that every single one of these commands is just kind of console-level gloss. Behind the scenes, there's a bunch of Ruby running that is scriptable. And so each one of these things right now might be formatted in a pretty ASCII-style table. But if you decide to script this, you literally create a Ruby script, and all of these are objects, hashes, all these other stuff that you can fully automate, which kind of makes it really powerful. All right, I'm going to skip that bit there because that's a bit boring. So this is where it starts to get a bit more fun. So you can call shell, and you end up with, you should end up with a shell, which is just like a command prompt, and you can do all the usual shenanigans. You can background shells, so they're sitting like if they're there's the other one. I meant that. And you can see, what is it, channels? I think, channel. You can see I've prepared for this. There we go. So that'll show you the shells that are in behind the scenes, and then you can re-interact with them. So if you kicked off a long-running process, you can just background that and let it run. And talk to it again a little bit later on. Okay, you can start executing commands, you can upload and download files, which I'm not going to show you, but it's literally take this file and plonk it over there. And once that's there, like if you had pw dump or something like that, upload pw dump, run it behind the scenes. The execution, I'll just show you the help file behind the scenes there. So when you call execute, there's a bunch of interesting things like making sure that you only execute in the context of your person and the thread tokens. The top one's probably the most useful. You know, if you decide to launch Notepad and migrate Meterpreter over, you don't want an empty Notepad connecting to the internet in the user space, because that would be a little inconspicuous. So you want to use -H for things like that.
Sorry, do you need system privileges to do that?
Do you need... No. You don't. You would still be running under the context of that user. Yeah. Okay. So this, by the way, this has all been here for quite a long time. This is nothing new. It's just it's a lot more stable now, and it will run on 64-bit like Windows 2012 and migrate up the wazoo without any problems. You've seen the webcam functionality because George, I think, has already demonstrated that, you bastard. So, so instead of using that, which actually you've done me a favour there, because on a Mac, getting the built-in camera to work inside of VM is a little bit flaky. So at the one point in my demo, I'm thinking this could crash at this point, but you've completely taken that pain away from me. So thanks for that.
Funnily enough, that's exactly how I did it.
There you go. All right. So, but you can do things like, let's take a screenshot of the current desktop, and that will take a snapshot, pretty much regardless of what session you're in, and that can prove to be pretty interesting. The users can have some rather sensitive information up on screen, copies it, converts it to a JPEG, throws it down Meterpreter, and as you can see, it drops it down. In fact, let me just show you so that I'm not a liar, prove that I'm not a liar. And there it is. Nothing particularly interesting at this point, but and that works on any version of Windows from 2000 all the way up to 2012 R2. Not that it's particularly interesting. Okay, next, the kind of things that start to get interesting, things like, where is it? Key scan. So this is just keyboard, basic keyboard. And you guys are familiar with keyboard more than I am, but the fact that you've got a Meterpreter session running, you can pretty easily just call key scan start, and off it goes. And so behind the scenes is now a thread running in Meterpreter, and what it's doing is it's keeping track of everything that I've pressed. So what I'm going to do is I'll just kick off Notepad and This is super secret. Can't cite that, All right, so at this point you can dump the contents and But as you can see, I mean, it will capture pretty interesting stuff, and it does capture the reason why it takes hold of the keys and stuff is because they're actually useful combinations when people are actually doing their work and you want to sort of monitor their workflows. So that's pretty helpful. I'm going to stop that. Hope it doesn't crash. So that's baked in. That's been inferred for quite a long time. You guys have probably used that on more than one occasion. All right, so backing up with, or trying to outdo Kieran with this hash dumping, this doesn't work. Why is that? So I'm running under the context of OJ. In Windows 7, I am a local admin, but I'm not a privileged user at this point, right? So if I try and hash dump, what you would normally expect to see is a list of hashes. But because I don't have the permissions to do so, the hash dump command actually fails. So what you would normally do in a Windows XP machine is you would type get system. And because Windows XP is incredibly secure, it would give you system and straight away you could do hash dump and you get everybody's hashes. But in the case of Windows 7, that's not the case. I can't just say please enable system access for me. So we're going to have to do a little bit more. So what I'm going to do here, just as a bit of a demo, to show you how Meterpreter can facilitate this kind of stuff, I'm going to background that and go back into Metasploit. And I'm going to use a local bypass UAC injection exploit. This is actually recently submitted by a chap called Meatballs. His real name's Ben, but he likes the name Meatballs. So there's two. There's the old one, the first one that you can see. This has been in for quite a long time. But this injection one actually does as much as it can in memory rather than dropping more stuff to disk. So the first one is dropping a few more binaries to disk. This one does a lot more stuff in memory. Okay, so I can just say let's use that. And look at my notes again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the payload to Windows, can't type, Windows Meterpreter first. I've typed Meterpreter quite a bit over the last 6 months, so that word's really easy now. Set my lhost to 172.168.167.1. So I'm just telling Meterpreter when it gets that session where to call out to. What I'm doing is I'm utilizing an existing session. So I'm going to set the session that I want to use for this exploit to 1. So if I list sessions here, you'll see I've got one session with an ID of 1. And that's the one that I want this exploit to kind of be channeled through. And so what should happen when I run this is Metasploit will package up some stuff, throw it down the neck of the current Meterpreter session. It will execute some stuff and hopefully pull back with another session with UAC bypassed. So all I need to do is type exploit. Now that was the because this is my segue into migration. So with the bypass UAC injection exploit, because it behaves differently to the original UAC exploit, it needs to have the architecture of the session that you're running in to be exactly the same as the host architecture. So you can't be running on the WoW 64. You need to be running on a 64-bit machine, a proper 64-bit process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the existing session and look at the processes that are running now. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but I'll filter out the not so interesting ones in just a second. So what I'd like to know, because this session, like I said, is not elevated, I can only migrate from a process with a certain set of permissions to another process with either the same or lower permissions. Okay? So I'm interested in processes that are owned by me and have an architecture of x86, x64. So these are the ones that I can migrate to at the moment, or I want to because they match the architecture. Now, a good target tends to be something that's going to be open when users actually log in, so something like Explorer.exe. Don't go to iExplore, that's a bad choice. Chances are they might close it or it just might crash. Don't go into that, you want to go for something like
VM tools?
VM tools is a good one. I usually go for Explorer because they actually have to log out before that happens. So, in order to do that, this still blows my mind every time I run this, now that I know how it works, it's like, wow, this is just amazing stuff. And where is it? Can anyone see the PID? Anyone? Here it is, 2404. Okay. Now, if anyone wants to know how this works, if they don't already, I'll talk to you about it after this. I'll talk about it. It's just fantastic. So we're literally jumping across process boundaries now. We're recycling handles. And as far as we're concerned, we're no longer running under the same process. We're running under Explorer. So let's pretend that I've owned somebody's browser to originally get execution. They can close the browser now, and I'm still, which is pretty cool. Hey, that's cool shit. I like that stuff. I'm going to say that again, by the way. Okay, so now we're in a 64-bit process. So now I'm going to background that, and I should be able to just re-exploit. Or should I? My target's changed. So originally, I said, I was kind of part of the 32-bit. And it said, well, actually, the target's 64-bit. But the payload that I set up locally was still 32-bit. So what this is now saying is, I need to change my target to 64-bit, and I need to set my payload to Windows x64 interpreter. And other than that, everything else should remain the same. Okay? So this time,
Fingers crossed.
here we go. Setting stage, new session. Fantastic. Okay, now this is cool because you can see we're actually a proper 64-bit server now. Okay? Now I'm still running under OJ, right? So my UID should be OJ. But now I should be able to call get system, and I'm now system. Alright. Patch none now works. Alright, so now we can take that and go and throw it in. What was that tool here? Moxie Martin Spider Story. Yeah, that's you. That's so that's pretty cool. Now I'm going to give myself a bit of a shameless plug here, because what you would normally have to do at this point, prior to running hash dump, is migrate to a process that was originally started as system. But I fixed that. Now you can just run hash dump without migrating again. So that's cool. Yeah. All right. So that's cool. That's pretty wicked stuff. Now who here knows about Mimikatz? Heard of Mimikatz before? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, nice. 4, 5. Okay, Mimikatz is a fantastic tool written by a guy called Ben. I think it's Delphi or something like that. He goes by the name Jennifer Wiki. Super smart guy. So it's tough reading his French C++, but it does some seriously cool stuff. So Meterpreter has a bunch of extensions, and one of them is called Mimikatz. And it basically takes this guy's code and shoves it in as a Meterpreter extension. To use extensions, you just type use, and you'll see there are a bunch of extensions that you can use out of the box. Pretend Pipit's not there, because that's the Metasploit Pro one. Which I'm not going to.
Subtle sales.
I thought you'd pick up on that one.
This isn't for you.
That's right. That's right. But if you want to know, so all you have to do is type use with the name of the extension. That actually loads the extension. That also uses reflective DLL injection, which means nothing goes on disk. It's just loading the DLL up into memory, registering with the process, but not standard way, so you still can't see it in process managers. You actually have to sniff memory to make sure that it's not there. So under help now, we should see some Mimikatz. Now what Mimikatz does is it dumps passwords out of memory. So anyone who's currently logged into the system with their credentials is now up for grabs.
Can't cache all that too.
Ask Kieran. Alright, so here we can see, I've just run the W digest command. So this is my password. It's not my normal password. But the really creepy, no.
I'll be checking that on your Gmail.
Yeah, no worries. So what this does is, you can see there are a bunch of other ones. So if I'm part of the Credential domain, or I'm signed into Windows 8, which uses live SSB, they're all up for grabs, which is pretty amazing. Now, bear in mind, like I said, this pulls stuff out of memory, which means service accounts. You've got a service running. Now, this is a little bit of a pro tip that I learned from somebody else, admittedly. I didn't come up with myself. But if you've owned a box and you're still running a system, you can actually move around. There's still value in having service account passwords, right? So even if services are not running, enumerate services to see which one's not running as network service or system or some local system, and start them. And then run Mimikatz. And you'll get the passwords for the service accounts at the same time. That's cool too, eh? But I can't take credit for that because that's literally Ben's work, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's not running. Oh.
Yeah, just start. And I'll show you how you'll be able to do that from Meterpreter as well. Okay. Ben's been hard at work since that version of Mimikatz. He's now released Mimikatz 2. It's got a Kiwi logo and stuff on it for the New Zealanders in the room. And that's a little bit different to the old Mimikatz. So I'm in the process right now of trying to get that code wired into Meterpreter. And I'm kind of part way through. And what I've done is I've decided to call this Kiwi, because I couldn't call it Mimikatz. Now, Mimikatz works really well on pretty much any versions of Windows so far, but version 2 relies on service pack levels and it doesn't work on Windows 2K. This is why we're not going to replace Mimikatz with just a straight version 2, because this is still valuable. There's still machines out there that you can use Mimikatz with. So this new extension is going to come about, which effectively does the same thing for the most part. So, for example, Creds All is the go-to. It'll rip through all of the different options, like hashes and passwords and whatnot, for you without really having to do much. But the cool one, I'm going to show you this help again, which I can't demo because I don't have any name or anything, is this golden tick down the bottom. Now, in Kieran's talk, you would have seen in his hash down there was Kerberos TGT hash. So that's the Kerberos ticket granting token or token granting ticket or whatever that happens to be. And what that allows you to do is create tickets kind of expire for a system admin that don't expire for however long. What this thing does is if you have that, you can create a ticket for yourself that can expire in 10 years. And you drop that locally to file on disk. And then later on when you gain access to the thing again, you literally go, you know what, I want to use that ticket again. And straight away you kind of elevate it to domain admin and you carry on running the system. So that's new, and that's pretty cool stuff. So again, big hat tip to him. He's constantly doing some amazing stuff with Windows security. Okay, so that's kind of Mimikatz. There's another thing called Incognito. Now Incognito's been around for a little while, but on a given machine at a given time, you have a set of tokens that are available to you. And those tokens vary for whatever reason. But at any given point, you might be running a particular user, but you might need to just switch context, just to look at something different, or to get access to someone's inbox, or whatever it happens to be. And this is what this allows you to do. So I just say, give me the current list of user tokens that are available to me, and it does it. And if at any point, let's say I'm interested in going back to becoming OJ, I can say, impersonate token OJ, and then I'm back as that person. And so obviously all the rules and whatnot that apply to that particular person continue to be. So that's pretty handy too. All right, so next thing I'd like to show you is something that landed in Master quite recently. It's a new extension called the Extended API. Whoops. Oh, don't tell me I deleted it. Oh no, I typed it wrong. There we go. Fat fingered again, huh? Fat fingered again. All right, so this has got quite a few new ones. We'll start up here. I'll come back to the window, because that's more of a trolling thing than anything else. But service enumeration and service querying is pretty useful, particularly in the context of what I've just said, if you're interested in service accounts. Now this looks actually pretty similar again to Kieran's stuff. If you say service enumeration, it'll give you the process IDs, the current state, whether or not a service can interact with the desktop, and some other sort of semi-useful information. You can drill down into one of these. So let's say I'm interested in Windows Defender. I can say query Windows Defender, and you'll get things like the DACL and how it started and that kind of stuff. Now, I understand this isn't particularly easy to read. And I'm in the process of fixing that. So if you guys actually have some suggestions on how you like to consume this information, I'd really like to hear it, because rendering this in a digestible format is actually quite tricky. So please, if you've got some ideas, hit me up at the end of the talk, because I'd really like to know them. Okay, what we're going to show you next. So, there are a bunch of ADC related things. So you're in an Active Directory domain. You want to be able to do a bunch of queries. So Active Directory querying is pretty useful. What this allows you to do is effectively do a bunch of ad hoc ADC style queries. So you can do LDAP filtering. You can say I want to query this domain for objects that are computers that are members of particular groups, and I want this subset of LDAP fields to come back out. Now again, I can't demonstrate this because I don't have Active Directory running on these machines, but this is now a master. So if you do an MSF update, you'll get this, and you can use it and play with it. So that's pretty handy stuff. Now here's something that's not yet in master. Now, anyone familiar with WMI? Who loves WMI? It's fantastic. Yeah, the amount of information that you can pull out of this thing is actually pretty scary. What's that?
There was a guy at CrikeyCon years ago who did a Trojan based entirely in WMI.
Oh, there you go.
It's like kind of like the PowerShell thing.
Yeah. It's the amount of information in here is really quite scary. I'm just going to show you. Oops. Creation day. From 32 process. All right, so you can execute just arbitrary queries. I didn't pull out the process ID, but basically what it's doing is it's taking that exact query, throwing it down in the Meterpreter, running it within the context of Meterpreter on the client, talking to the common APIs, serializing all the stuff, returning it back, and giving you the information. So any query that you can do as the particular user, counter to that user, elevate your cribs or impersonate or whatever it is you need to do, and you can run arbitrary queries. And you can get pretty handy information out of this. I mean, there's people in this room that would know more about WMI than me, so hopefully you can use your imaginations and just go, wow, that was amazing. All right, so next thing, Clipboard related stuff. Now, I would say that, again, you guys know more about this than I do as pen testers, but the squishy people behind the keyboards are becoming more interesting targets as systems become harder to lock down. When I first started working on Meterpreter, on a few occasions I thought, how come there's no ability to snuff stuff off the clipboard? Because, there are some pretty interesting stuff moving across the clipboard in people's day-to-day lives. And I'm not talking about memes or lolcats or anything like that, but, security conscious people, for example, who use things like keypads. So I chatted to the guys behind the scenes of Rapid 7, and they've thought about this before. It was like, yeah, we just haven't had time. There are some people who have tried to do it in the past, but they either ran out of time or the ask or the APIs aren't particularly nice. So what I thought was, hey, I'm a dev, maybe I can contribute something. So I started with these Clipboard APIs. Now I started with just a simple get data call. The reason why it's called get data is because you technically don't know what format that the data is going to be in. It could be a bunch of files, it could be raw text, it could be RTF, it could be a snapshot of an image. So you don't know what it is until you ask for it. Right, so before
5 minutes, okay.
5, shit.
Yeah. That's why I'm
Thanks for that.
But it's only wide after you, so...
Oh, okay, alright, so I can take it maybe a little bit longer. I should probably squeeze it in. Alright, so I'm just going to say, for example, snip something there. And what that's doing is that's saying, hey, there's actually an image on the clipboard of these dimensions. But, if they've got like a 10 screen setup and their res is through the roof, like this image could be like 10 meg or something ridiculous. So it's telling you that it's there, but it's not downloading it.
So should you rename that get metadata?
No. Whereas if you hit -D for download, it will actually pull whatever it is that they've got on the clipboard down as a file. And again, that works kind of like screenshotting, but slightly differently. And that's now sitting on your disk, and you can do whatever fantastic things that you would like to do with it. You can do, where are we, clipboard, you can set text. So someone's about to paste something and then, it's weird. Is that useful? I don't know. It was my own time. Hey, I'll do whatever the hell I like.
Something more along the lines of keep your dog for snake.
Yeah, exactly. So, hang on, wait. No, it's not going to work now.
This is what happens when you teach devs how to hack.
Yeah. All right. Now, as fun and as useful as I think this is, it's not really handy to have to sit there as a pen tester and go, get, and hopefully someone's actually transferring something useful. So after doing this, I started doing the clipboard monitor, which basically works like a keylogger. So that now sits behind the scenes. And whatever it is that I decide to do is now being logged. So let's pretend I am a security conscious user and I'm using KeePass. Just give my VM a couple of decades to actually load this up now. What was the password for this? It's not Schmoopy theory. Where are No, that one's for the Hitchhiker fans. See if you can figure it out. All right, so I'm browsing the websites and I'm copying usernames and I've pasted and then I'm copying passwords. Now down the bottom there, I'm just going to let this run out because a common question is, what happens when KeePass has this little timeout thing? You know, how do you handle that? Well, this is already too late. If you put something on the clipboard, Windows tells Meterpreter that there's now different content on the clipboard. So if at this point you say dump, so you can see there's the username, there's the password, and what happens is it's just kind of setting the clipboard data as a null. And so that's just saying, hey, you know, they've actually cleared the clipboard behind the scenes. So does this actually work with other things? Well, yeah, as I've shown you already. If I take screenshots, say I'm capturing some sensitive information, or let's say, excuse me, let's say these end user license agreements are really interesting. So I copy those. Now if I dump at this point, I'm copying all the files down that were copied into the clipboard, and I'm taking copies of the screenshots that were up on the screen at the same time, and that's all drop local. So we're literally taking everything that people are doing. And this is completely configurable because if you're attached to the desktop of a graphic designer and they're using Photoshop,
that's what I was going to ask.
There's a lot of image data on there that you don't want.
Like what happens if we copy like an ISO or something?
Yeah. It's a perfectly good question. All right, so when you start the clipboard monitor, there are some options. So you can say, I want you to capture on the remote side what like the files and the image content that's being called. Sorry, the image content. And then when you dump, there are also a bunch of options that say, actually I don't want you to copy down the content of the files, or I don't want you to give me the image content.
Why can't you set a file size limit?
Because nobody told me to.
We've already done. It's already come down to here. You did dump, does it already come across to you on this side, or is it sitting over there?
It's when you type in dump,
Yeah.
and it's pulling that as it's outputting, it's pulling the content down to you.
Does it remove that memory on the host that was running on as well?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
What happens if you don't dump and you're sitting there running for like a long time and your buffer's filled?
That's
Yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah.
That's unfortunately it's your problem with it.
There's two development statements.
Yeah.
Nobody told me, and
I can remove this feature. Alright, so the question about purging is key, right? There's a flag here that says don't delete stuff that's remote. You can even run this and say, I don't want any content, just purge. Just get rid of whatever's there. So you might actually do an initial scan and say, don't purge the content, but don't download anything, so you get visibility of what's there. And then you might go, yeah, no, it's all crap, just purge it and let it keep on running. So you do have some kind of control. And like I said, this is completely scriptable. This is just the UI level stuff. If you drop in Ruby, you can script the hell out of this.
So that's basically doing a background task.
Yeah.
Really, really dumb.
Yeah. Exactly. We're currently working on, it's pretty tricky to do, but get streaming happening behind the scenes so you can turn streaming on rather than having to say, please dump the stuff. As the stuff is captured, it'll throw it back down the neck of Metasploit. All right, I've got to move on quickly because
Well, you're actually
I'm out of time.
If you're doing clipboard dump,
Yep.
and then copying an ISO file,
Yep.
why end up with the 600 notepad.exe process?
No. Because the file itself is not actually copied into memory. we're just keeping track of which files. So there's a little bit of a loophole. Like if they cut and paste, and you try and download the files after they move, then you've got a problem. I don't really know how to solve that one, because you have that dilemma of, if I do take a copy of this or automatically download stuff, I can literally DOS myself, which I don't really want to do. So I've kind of just left it open for you guys to battle with.
Size limits came in though, right?
A big pardon?
I think it's when the size limits came in though.
Yeah.
I think he just asked you to put size limits in.
I think he did, and like I said, I'll look forward to his pull request. I just want to finish off with just a couple of small things.
We'll let OJ go over time.
Yeah, it's all right. Thank you. I'm sick.
You're fully sick, man.
All right, so I'll skip. There's something called Railgun. Go look it up. It's really cool stuff. But what I want to do now is just sort of show you how you can port forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a local port of 5555. The remote port I'm interested in is 445, and the host that I'm targeting is a different VM. 167.139.
Oh, you're about to do something cool.
I hope so. Alright, so now, if I background this for a sec, and I go netstat, so you can see I actually do have a port listening locally. So now I can start fiddling with this. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use everybody's favourite SOB. Yeah, everyone loves this one. Oh, you know how this has changed recently? I'll tell you later. Alright, so I need to set my L host again, 172.
Fancy your dinner plans, folks.
Set L port. I'll leave the port standard. I need to do something quirky with the host. Don't set to local host like 127.0.0.1, because that's actually a special reserved address inside Metasploit and it won't work. So I'm setting our host to basically what it's listening on. At which point, let me just make sure I go set payload. I'll go Windows, Meterpreter, TCP again, and exploit. So, I've got to set my L ports to 5555. I can't. I'm connecting with the wrong thing. Did I mistype something? I think I did, didn't I? I need to set our port. Thank you. Port 445. I should just kind of show options. Alright, does that look right? So I'm attacking kind of myself. That should be 5555 and it should be, yeah. Bollocks. Port 155.
Oh, sick though. Extra 5 there, buddy.
God damn it! I should have finished 5 minutes ago. All right, does that seem legit? I can't spit just by like, oh, for God's sake. There we go. All right.
And yet it's working. What?
Woo! All right. Thank you. All right, so pretty simple stuff, really. What I've done is, with my existing Meterpreter session, I'm now tunneling ports directly through. There are a number of ways to do this. You can add routes directly from Metasploit. So add this network range to that session, and it just routes traffic straight through that session. What I've done here is just literally taken a Windows XP port 445, tunneled it through locally through my Meterpreter session, and I've attacked a Windows XP machine using MS-080667. And as you can see, so I'm already running a system. There was one other thing I wanted to show you, the network system, and I'm going to skip that because I've already run out of time. Thank you very much.